Yo, welcome back to the YGOHouse, everybody, where today we're going to be doing a quick market watch for today, January 12th, 2023. We haven't seen a lot of movement in the market simply because we've been away from the TCG meta for so long. Like, we haven't had YCS up until I think like last week in YCS Sydney. So new decks and new contenders haven't come out, mostly because Tier Elements is still dominating the boards and we just haven't seen people tinker with anything new. But that doesn't mean I haven't seen some interesting things in the market I wanted to point out to you. Let's just jump straight into this. Let's not waste any time and let's look over the market right now. One of the main things that I found interesting is the Trisprite engine is starting to move back up a little bit. Of course, in the OCG, it seems like Trisprite was a very real variant people were playing when the first YCS, well, their equivalent of YCS, were taking place after the ban list and the big hits to tier. A lot of people were tinkering with this deck, and for good reason. Trisprite is like one of the best generic link engines that you can find. Of course, locks you into Beast Warriors and Wing Beast, but there are so many good cards that fit that description. You can mix this with so many different archetypes. The fact that one of their better cards in Karis, as well as Kit being level 2, gives you some synergy with Sprite. These cards are definitely going to be moving up a bit more. Probably not going to get too expensive. If there is a card that's going to get expensive again, it's probably Fractal. It's always remained like the most expensive of the Trisprite cards. At one point, I think it was sitting at like $5. It's creeping towards the $4 mark for both copies of this card. So if you're interested in picking up the Trisprite engine and you don't have it yet, even though it's a somewhat old engine, I'd recommend doing so sooner rather than later. Most of the cards are not going to be too bad. Like Kit with the reprint in the 2022 tins has dropped from like an $8 super to below $2. Karis is going to be cheap. Nerval has a common printing, so it's going to be super cheap. But Fractal only having an Ultra and a Prismatic, it actually maintains its value a bit. And the only other card within the engine that really maintains value is going to be Shuriag. Mainly that OG Secret Rare printing, which is now up towards about the $10 mark. So Trisprite is always going to be a good engine. They haven't really hit anything directly in the engine. They haven't hit anything actually directly in the engine, which makes it still really formidable. So if you're very interested in picking up Trisprite and mixing it with any of the numerous archetypes that are out there, I mean, Bird Up is still good. Go ahead and pick these up now. Don't waste your time. You're going to regret it in the future, I think. So we're moving into this format where Kashtira look like they're going to be either kings or second fiddle to tier elements. I know a lot of people are going to be playing Kashtira, and Mushroom Man number 2 finds itself in an interesting spot. This card allows you to give it control to your opponent. You give this to your opponent, and then they keep the card until they can link it off or whatever, but this ruins their Kashtira plays, because Kashtiras, of course, you need to have no monsters in order to special summon. So this can actually help keep some of the board presence that they have to a minimum. They can't necessarily just start with Unicorn or Fenrir. They have to open Birth at that point, because even if they link this thing away, they still control a monster. So it's a little bit of a niche effect, and I really don't expect this card to get expensive, but it only does have one printing in Metal Raiders, but the fact that we're getting the anniversary set coming out in like July or whatever, and the fact that Metal Raiders has been printed unlimited a couple times, you really shouldn't have problems finding cheaper copies of this card. But because it might be a meta call, there's no telling how it might fluctuate simply because it only has the one printing. So if you're fearful of Kashtira and you feel like this might be a way to limit that deck, I definitely recommend taking a look at this card. Speaking of Kashtira, we're seeing some pretty big movement. It's pretty interesting that Shangri-Ira is actually sitting at about $1 for the market price now, considering this card was pretty much since the entire run when Darkon Dragon had first released. It was a really cheap card. If you don't have this card by chance, I'd recommend getting it, because if this deck does perform the way we're expecting it, it could be a $2 to $3 super rare. We see that pretty often. We saw it with Shiren. Shiren in the Tier Elements deck was like $2 to $3 at one point, so don't sleep on this card. Unicorn is getting up there in price and staying up there in price. I remember it shot up to about the $25 mark not too long ago, and then it has kind of just held steady since. This card has fluctuated quite a bit. When it first came out, it was $6, and I don't think we did a market watch at the time, but I remember seeing it at that price and saying that, man, this card's probably going to get way more expensive. I didn't expect it to be this expensive before the release of the new support, but with the release of the new support, this card could actually get a bit more pricey. I really wouldn't be surprised if it jumps up to the $30 to $40 range, simply because Papyrus is honestly the most important card to the Kashtira strategy, and it being the searcher for that makes it so much more valuable. Also, being able to look at your opponent's extra deck and banish one card face down is a really strong effect, and it honestly has more applications than something like Fenrir, which is always going to need something on field. So Unicorn is definitely a card. If you still don't have this, you need to probably buy it now if you're interested in playing the deck. You're really going to regret if you don't have copies of this card, because I could really see this shooting up even higher than it is right now. If you're looking to stop Kashtira, I know we've talked about Book of Eclipse before, and Book of Eclipse I think is in a really good spot because it has an Astral Pack printing, an Astral Pack, Duelist Pack, Turbo Pack, OTS Pack, those types of cards, especially older versions of it, really before they turned into OTS packs, they're usually like the chase card of the printings. Like, people really want those cards because they're limited and hard to get. So Book of Eclipse having a super rare Astral Pack printing is probably really going to help, as well as its ultra rare printing being in Dual Devastator, which was a really good set. It also has a rare that came out in Tactical Masters. There's so many copies of this card for you to get, but this is honestly one of the better board breakers for Kashtira. If you get your zones locked out, being able to flip the Shangri-Era face down is really strong, but because they also have a Rise Heart, this card is also an option to flip that face down to keep that Macrocosmos off the board. So Book of Eclipse, really good spot. I don't see it getting much higher than this, even in that ultra rare slot, but it could potentially shoot towards like $1.50 to $2 easily. So if you really want this card and you think this is going to be the one you go with for a board breaker against Kashtira, go ahead and pick this card up now. It's better safe than sorry. Now, Spring-Ins. The only Spring-Ins card that I've noticed that's really gone up in price is Merrymaker. This card is a super rare that's teetering towards $1. And usually when you see that type of movement, when the new support comes out, because they are getting, Champions Sargus, I believe is the name of it. It's essentially like a Therion Spring-In Searcher on a generic rank 8, which is super strong, but Merrymakers is actually pretty integral to the Spring-In strategy in itself. So I know Spring-In Sprite is like a deck, or Spring-In's Therion Sprite, or like just Spring-In's Therion is a deck that some people are going to be looking at. And if you are, go ahead and pick up the Merrymaker, because only having one printing of a super rare, we've already kind of hit the Lightning Overdrive reprint cycle that felt like it was more towards the 2022 10s, as well as Mama, if there were any. The fact that it didn't get a reprint, people might try to gouge in this price. If this deck becomes even rogue, like, people will probably try to push this price up. So that's just an interesting card that I saw. Some more cards that I've seen that are interesting is the Scareclaw engine. Now, this is probably for a couple reasons. One, it pairs really well with Tri-Brigade. It already kind of is a good rogue deck as a standalone, but mixing it with Tri-Brigade makes it decent. But there's also the Mana Dome or Mana Dome archetype, which is coming out soon in Cyberstorm Access. That archetype is like the new Visas archetype, and the Scareclaws pair very well. So the cards that you're going to want to keep an eye out for specifically are basically all the foils. That includes Scareclaw Arrival, Scareclaw Reichheart, Scareclaw Triheart, and Scareclaw Lightheart. These cards are the 4 that people are going to play in the deck. Triheart, not so much, but honestly, just because it's this expensive already, I might consider picking up a copy of it, because if you play Scareclaws like a standalone deck, you're going to need 1 to 2 copies of this card. But Reichheart was like a $1 card at one point. I have like 6 copies of this card. I bought them all for $1, and I'm just kind of waiting to see how much they go up. Arrival is a super rare that's teetering towards $2, and just like I said before, when you see super rares creep up this much, you can maybe expect an even bigger hike. If the Mana Dome deck is tier 1 and is like a meta threat, like a lot of people are expecting, and it's definitely its infancy in terms of testing, Scareclaw Arrival could easily shoot towards the $2 to $3 card, and that's just not something you want to pay for a super rare from Dimension Force. Power of the Elements has the unlimited version that just came out, so Lightheart is not as big of a scare, but Reichheart and Arrival you definitely are going to want to keep an eye on, because there's a few decks that are going to want to play this card. Same goes for Reichphobia. It's going to be a 3 of in that Mana Dome deck. What it looks like is that you really want to splash those 2 engines together in maximum, in terms of the maximum ratios, so You're going to want 3 copies of this card as well, and it is also shooting back up towards like the $5 mark. It's coming down pretty significantly, which is pretty good, so you can probably wait another week or so for this thing to go down, but once you see it start to plateau, you should probably take your shot at that point. Photon Orbital. We're heading into Photon Hypernova, and of course, Galaxy Eyes gets some new cards, I believe. And Photon Orbital is like one of the most important cards to the strategy. It's essentially the card that became the starter for the deck, even though it doesn't really have a starter. It's a deck with 1,000 extenders and 0 starters. But Photon Orbital is a really, really good card. And this card used to be like $4 to $6, but now it's creeping up back towards 10 because it only has 2 printings. A secret, which was a promo in Legendary Duelist Season 2, and then an ultra in the like actual booster box Legendary Duelist. And those sets suck. The ratios are always really, really bad. It's really hard to pull foils in general. So it doesn't surprise me that these cards are expensive. If you want to play Photon and you want to play Galaxy Eyes, Orbital is probably still a 3 of at this point. And while Afterglow Dragon getting that reprint was good, Orbital still has not seen another one since then. So I couldn't imagine that the price is going to go down any. It's only going to go up. Diablastus, since we're still talking about Kashtira a little bit, Diablastus is super broken. Like, this card is insane. Allows you to reach into the extra deck and banish stuff face down, and then essentially allows you to almost exponentially banish stuff off the top of your opponent's deck. They banish cards off the top of their deck equal to the number of cards they already have banished face down. So they just keep banishing and banishing and banishing. And this being a generic rank 7 is super easy to go into, and pairing this with something like Unicorn, ripping 2 cards out of the extra deck on your first turn before you really go into most of your plays is just insane. And I really wouldn't be surprised if this card is one of the cards that gets banned when Kashtira starts seeing hits later on, because after that first week of the new support coming out, people are going to get sick and tired of this card. It is just ridiculous that this card even exists. Another really good card for Kashtira is Darkon Dragon, or Dark Armed, the Dragon of Annihilation. This card's really good. It's a generic, again, rank 7, but it really allows you to plus, because you detach a material, target a card and banish it, and then you banish a card from your graveyard. Something like Preparations can only fish out of the banish zone. So say you have something like Preparations up, it allows you to take a card out of the banish zone and bring it back. And Birth also allows you to get stuff from the banish zone as well, so you don't care if a card's banished. It essentially allows you to plus or keep your graveyard / banish zone in check while being able to have some sort of removal. So really important card. It's really slept on. I think you definitely have missed the mark if you were trying to pick this card up for cheap, but this is definitely a card you don't want to wait on, because I do think that it's going to be one of the better cards in the extra deck that people are going to reach for. Now, Blackwings is getting a new synchro, or like a new tuner or something pretty soon, and Sujiri has actually gone up a little bit. The market price has gone down just a tad, but this card has hovered around $3 to $5 for pretty much its entire existence, and that's pretty surprising to me. Blackwings are definitely still rogue. It's very much a fragile combo deck that can be stopped pretty easily, but if you like this deck, I know it's one of the most popular archetypes of all time, I would really recommend getting this card sooner rather than later. Ultra rares and secrets like appreciate in value a lot, and I don't see this thing getting a reprint anytime soon. So if Blackwing should break through in some way, shape, or form, this is going to be a card that's going to see a major price hike, and you just don't want to have to pay that type of price. Coming out in Photon Hypernova as well is the White Zoa of Dogmatica, which is a really powerful ritual boss monster for the Dogmatica archetype, and I think a few people, including myself, are going to be interested in picking up a pure Dogmatica deck as a rogue strategy within the format. Although it's definitely not as consistent, this deck can still be really fun to play, and some of these cards are still really, really strong. Like, as an engine, Dogmatica doesn't see as much play, but it's still a really good deck on its own with the release of the new cards. Ecclesia is still like $5-6, so you don't ever want to wait too long to get that playset. Thank goodness Florida Lee got that Ultra in the 2021 tins. It's brought down its price significantly. Maximus also has a reprint. Really, the only card you have to look out for is Ecclesia. Because if for some reason this Dogmatica deck with the new support tiers in any sort of way, even if it's tier 2, if it's better than Rogue, Ecclesia could easily shoot up back towards $7 to $8, and you don't want to have to pay those types of prices. It's just ridiculous. If you can see something coming, you need to take advantage of it. That's why I think Blazing Cartesia It was a card that you should have picked up a long time ago. Again, I don't think a market watch released around the time I was thinking about getting this card. I picked one up for myself finally, and this card's now 24 bucks. It was hovering about $30 like last week, which was ridiculous after some of the new branded stuff got announced. But I think now that people are actually playtesting the new branded stuff and aren't just theory crafting in their head, and they realize what cards are good and what aren't, Blazing Cartesia is going to go down a little bit. But because it's part of the branded lore, and you can never tell when that archetype's going to get new support, I know it seems like it's done with the release of that new field spell. It's also a secret rare from a set that just came out. So these ring all the alarm bells for me for a card that's going to get really, really expensive well before it gets a reprint. So if you like this card, or if you're somebody who does try to quote-unquote invest, although we never recommend it, this is definitely one of those cards I could see picking up simply because it's included in the lore really helps it out. And of course, being a secret rare helps it appreciate at pretty big fluctuations. Another secret from Darkon Blast that I think should be touched on is Sprite Sprint. And the main reason why is that the Sprite engine is generic, first of all, so you're going to see it all over the place until it finally gets hit. But all the other Sprite cards have now been reprinted other than Double Cross because of the Unlimited Power of the Elements release. That doesn't mean that something like Elf is going to get really cheap. I think Elf is still a card you want to take a look at, but Sprite Sprint is really strong. And if Two Elements gets a hit, Kashtira get a hit that take them from being the best decks of the format, Sprite literally just steps right into that spot. So Sprite instantly becomes the best deck of the format and instantly needs both of their two really good link monsters in those packages. So why would you not pick up Sprite Sprint? This card is still going down a little bit in price, starting to plateau around $6 to $7. But again, if Sprite becomes more relevant than it already is, or becomes the best deck of the format due to a ban list, this could easily become a $12 to $13 card like we were seeing earlier in its lifespan. So I feel like now is the right time to pick this card up if you really want it. The Bestials are getting new support in Photon Hypernova. Bestial Baldrig is coming out, and I think that's actually going to drive the price of almost all of these up a bit. I think Baldrig is going to take the place of Sireneer as a generic hand trap only. If you're not playing a Bestial deck, you won't need Sireneer anymore because Baldrig actually pairs really well with Jewess Worm. That's why I expect Jewess Worm to probably go up even more. It's sitting at 14 right now. It really wouldn't surprise me if it goes up to where Magnemute is now, and if Magnemute doesn't go up towards $20 to $21, because the engine is only getting stronger. Baldrig allows you to tribute another light or dark monster in order to banish a Ritual, Link, Xyz, Fusion, or Synchro monster. It might only be ones from the extra deck, it might not include Ritual, but it allows you to banish that target. So that's really strong removal, especially against Tier, being able to banish something now instead of Jewess Worm. But if you use Jewess Worm for that effect, you get a 2 for 1, you get to banish a card, and then Jewess Worm's effect will send something to the grave. So that little combo right there as part of interruption on these hand traps is just ridiculous. It really wouldn't surprise me if these cards get even more expensive once Baldrig drops, because that card's insane as well. Now, Labyrinth is something that I definitely didn't see coming in terms of its price range. If you look right now, they have two cards that are like $30 a pop. We have Welcome Labyrinth. Well, I guess Ariana's not $30. It's like $20, but Welcome Labyrinth, which is a necessary 3 of, is $30 a copy, and Ariana, which I also believe is a 3 of, is like $23 to $24 a copy. This is kind of ridiculous, and I really didn't see it coming. I always thought that Labyrinth was a good trap deck, like a really good rogue strategy, but with the addition of Lady Labyrinth, and then they get another trap card called like something Welcome Labyrinth, it's like a new version of Welcome Labyrinth, it becomes even better. It's not an engine, it's a deck, but it's really, really expensive. And if you want to play this deck, you're really going to have to shell out the big bucks. It's not dropping anytime soon. Tactical Masters just dropped, so you're not going to get any reprints of these cards, I don't think, anytime soon. You're really going to be reaching in your wallet. Lady Labyrinth, I think if you were to take a shot in the dark at trying to buy one of these to flip, which again, we don't necessarily recommend, I think Lady Labyrinth and Lovely Labyrinth could be cards you look at simply because they're the boss monsters, and Lady Labyrinth is the highest rarity card that's come out in the archetype in general, so that could drive it up, but just a bit of a surprise that this deck is as expensive as it is at this point. Raid Raptor Arsenal Falcon. I think this is the last Kashtira card that we're talking about, but if you didn't know, Kashtira can also hit you with Stormwinds. Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds is ridiculously broken, annoying, everybody hates it in Flunder, but this deck can actually do it as well. You just make 2 level 7s and then you drop down a Stormwinds on the end of your turn, and your opponent has to kind of sit there and either waste a battle phase or find some sort of removal for it. And that can be really, really annoying. It only has 1 printing as a super rare, and as you can see, it spiked pretty heavy back in November, but it's starting to kind of fluctuate again, but for the most part, it's staying around that $3.50 to $4 range. If you want to play Kashtira and you want to go for the Stormwinds lock, we all hate you, first of all, but second of all, you're going to want to go ahead and do that now, before this new support drops, before people who haven't had their eyes on it get their eyes on it, because it's only going to go up from here. I think we can actually kind of put Dracosac in the same as a Kashtira card, but really this card is being used in a plethora of strategies and really had a spotlight held on it in the OCG because people were using the Dracosac and the next card we're talking about as well, Cherubini combo, to use King of the Swamp to get into Rural Kalos. So Dracosac is a generic rank 7. It gives you 3 level 3 tokens. You can then take those tokens, turn that into a Cherubini. It might only be 2, but you only need 2 regardless. You take those 2 tokens and you make a Cherubini. The Cherubini can either drop a Havness or it can drop a King of the Swamp. It drops its cost, so they're always going to hit the grave. It doesn't trigger the Havness, but you don't care. And then you can turn the Cherubini and the Dracosac, or if there's another token, you can even use the token. Again, I don't know if it's 3. Let me look real quick. I think it's 2, but it might be 3. I'm not sure. I think it's only 2, though. I think Auroradon was 3. Yeah, so you get 2 tokens out of it. Then you take the Dracosac on the Cherubini and link that for Sprite Sprint and dump Merly. So then right away you have a Kit Kalos fusion. In the OCG, you have a way to get into Rural Kalos without needing Kit Kalos. Of course, Cherubini has been used a lot for the Adventure Engine. If you can find a way to do that, you can go into the Adventure Engine. So you can use this in Kashtira if you go into the Adventure side of Kashtira. If you really need that negate, this is a way to do that as well. But this little combo here is pretty annoying, and the fact that you can actually destroy your cards on the field as well in Tier Elements is kind of relevant too, because it can help trigger effects. So Dracosac is going up bit by bit in most of its printings, but there is a rare printing of this card, so it shouldn't be too bad. You don't have to pay more than, well, a rare at about $1 is sometimes kind of odd to see. So I wouldn't be surprised if this shoots up towards like $150 to $2, but it's really not that cheap. It's not that expensive. It's really cheap. If you want higher end versions of this card, you're going to expect to pay a pretty penny. And then Cherubini, I think now is probably the time to get it, like before this stuff even happens, because if there is a ban list to Tier Elements and they do something drastic like hit Kit Kalos, if people still want to play that deck, they're going to need Cherubini, and it's only going to go up. So this could be a card that you could quote unquote invest in for later usage, or if you want to play the deck, this is a card I recommend getting as well. So yeah, that's going to be it for the Market Watch today. I hope you all enjoyed. Be on the lookout for some more content. We're really trying to pump out some more content and get a actual schedule for you guys. We appreciate all the love we've been seeing. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what you guys want to see next in the comment section below. Peace, y'all.